Member for Rockdale.
Well, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak in support of the petitioners, my embattled friends, the many thousands of mum and dad investors across this state who have been sold up the river by this government. You don't deserve the way you've been treated. No one deserves that. Let's just get that clear, all of those empty words. When I began speaking on this issue several years ago, taxi plate investments were worth hundreds of thousands of dollars more than they are today. That destruction of capital, and with it the retirement incomes of those who depend upon taxi plates, have been obliterated on this government's watch. When the state of New South Wales sold these plates, when it so heavily regulated this industry, it made a promise. It made a promise to these investors that it would treat them fairly. Madam Speaker, when I first spoke in this place on the need for fair compensation in March 2016, I raised the hypocritical statements made by many members opposite back in 2009 in response to a far smaller reform that Labor introduced into the industry. Incidentally, those reforms back then did not see taxi plates drop in value by 1 cent. I won't rehash all the crocodile tears of members opposite, but I do think it's worth repeating what Premier Berejiklian said at the time when she was Shadow Transport Minister. And this is quite what the Premier said back then. Some people have put their entire life savings into a taxi plate. It is their main investment in life. This is our current Premier, Gladys. But their world will be turned upside down if the bill is passed in its current form. We want reform, but we want to ensure the reform is fair, and the people who, as recently as last month, purchased a plate valued at $400,000 will not see that investment diminished overnight, because the state government should have worked harder in consulting the industry. That's what the Premier said back then, Madam Speaker. I ask the Premier today, how's that belief system going for you? The Premier saw a great threat to taxi plate investments over a reform which saw no real loss in value to taxi plate owners. But as Minister, Treasurer and Premier, she has overseen the loss of hundreds of thousands of dollars to these same people without pausing for thought. There is a reason that these taxi plate owners are angry. You've said one thing and done another, and they know it. They know it, Minister. What absolute hypocrisy. Madam Speaker, when the Point-to-Point Transport Taxi and Hire Vehicles Bill 2016 came before this House, I said that $20,000 per plate was a grossly inadequate amount of compensation for losses that had already run into hundreds of thousands of dollars and are only getting worse as time goes on. I also raised the fundamentally unfair nature of the discretionary hardship payment scheme and the thousands who did not receive a fair hearing or adequate compensation under that scheme, who have signed this petition to prove just how ridiculous that proposal was. Madam Speaker, in February 2017, I raised a matter which has affected nearly all of those who receive the government's paltry compensation payments: the failure of our state government to coordinate with the Commonwealth to exclude these payments from income tax. Those opposite failed to address those concerns in the initial $20,000 compensation payments, and disgracefully failed once again a few years later when hardship payments were distributed. Worse still, for those receiving Centrelink benefits, the state government failed to pre-approve those first payments as Centrelink exempt. And then the government somehow managed to fail again with hardship payments, leaving thousands with their pension and welfare payments slashed. There is a pattern here, a pattern of stuff-ups and failure. I spoke to Minister Constance countless times about the need to classify these payments as capital adjustments, but it's just in one ear and out the other with this guy. Either he doesn't care, or he's incompetent, or maybe both. But, Madam Speaker, today I ask this government once again to show some compassion to the hard-working taxi plate investors who trusted this great state of New South Wales. The Act calls for a review after 5 years. Do it now. The evidence will show that these people deserve fair compensation. Fair compensation, they deserve fair treatment, and they deserve a fair buyback.
Madam Speaker.